For the past month, I've been tracking my work hours, mostly to prove to myself that I'm not lazy. Do you have that self-talk too? The kind that says you'd be more successful if you only worked harder, or if you were less lazy, you'd weigh less, you'd be happier, you'd have accomplished more, that you just, in general, be a better person? My inner critic, who I like to call Nellie, says those things all the time. She's awful. Also, she's wrong. And she's wrong even though all my careful tracking showed me that I only work about 10 or 15 hours a week. I'm not lazy, and neither are you, and I'm going to tell you why. One of the first things I learned when I started using the time tracking software Clockify is that it's nearly impossible to track creative work. I would diligently press the button every time I sat down to write, but I really quickly figured out that by the time I sit down to write, a good chunk of the work is already done. The words are already there. They've been percolating for hours or days or weeks. And when I sit down to my notebook and my keyboard, I'm really just transcribing what's been swimming around in my head and then organizing it a bit and massaging it into its final form. 1 hour of writing represents, I do not even know how many hours of thinking and ruminating and composing in my head. This is the point where I say, if you appreciate the work that goes into these videos, tap the thumbs up button and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I still haven't met the threshold for subscriber and watch time hours to be paid for the time that I put into YouTube. And right now, more than ever, every action you take can help my videos to reach more people and get me closer to that goal. If you are interested in the intersection between creativity, slow living, and mental health, you are in the right place, and I really hope we can continue to grow this community together. Okay. Psychologists call the downtime that usually precedes creative insight the incubation period. It's a real and studied thing. In his book, Laziness Does Not Exist, which I'm going to talk a lot more about later, Dr. Devon Price writes that creativity requires safety, relaxation, and rest. Our society is not structured to acknowledge or compensate for those things, but that doesn't change the necessity of them. An incubation period is part of the creative process. It just doesn't look like what we've been conditioned to think of as productivity. And in American society and much of the rest of the world, if you're not being productive, the only alternative is that you're being lazy. We're going to come back to that too. For those of us who live with mental illness or who are going through difficult life phases, what looks like laziness is actually emotional work. Stress, anxiety, and depression all sap energy. Of course they do. Our brains run on glucose, same as everything else in our body. And I can tell you for sure that when Nellie gets going, I have to expend a lot of effort to counter and protect myself against all those negative thoughts. It's not just our brains, though, because all mental illnesses also come with physiological effects. When I was at the worst point of depression, I slept at every opportunity because my body knew that sleep was a needed respite from the constant pressure of my thoughts. Anxiety attacks throw our body into fight or flight mode, expending energy to increase your heart rate and prepare your muscles for a surge of motion. And long-term stress and trauma disorders like PTSD keep the body in a version of that state indefinitely. All of these things I'm describing feel like work. That brings me back to Devon Price's book, which I will admit I'm still working my way through. His premise is that laziness, as we define it in our society, just isn't a reality. He calls it the laziness lie and says it has three main tenets. First, that your worth is your productivity. Second, that you can't trust your own feelings and limits. And third, that there is always more you could be doing. Throughout the rest of the book, he brings in both research and anecdote to refute each of these tenets, which is great. But I also think that most of us can just look at them and see how ridiculous they are. The problem isn't that the concept of laziness being a lie is far-fetched. It's that most of us never find reason to step back and examine that lie in the first place. Why would we? The fact that we're constantly battling laziness, that our worth is in what we do rather than who we are, is baked into our culture. It feels innate. We're taught it in ways both subtle and direct, if not from the time we're born, at least from the first day we set foot in school. And we don't question it until we do. I've already mentioned a couple of circumstances that explain why we need more downtime than we think. But what I really want to get across here is that those circumstances aren't exceptions. Humans have hard limits to how much time they can work productively. For office workers, research has shown that that limit is about 3 hours a day. Workers in the office for 40 or even 50 hours a week spend most of their time chatting with coworkers, browsing social media, making coffee, and if you were in my office in the late 90s, building forts out of cardboard boxes and having Nerf wars in them. That's not laziness, and it's not wasted time. We all do those things because it's what our brain requires for the kind of taxing mental work most office jobs require. Looking at the real numbers behind a work week, my 10 hours on the clock starts to look downright normal. I'm not lazy. You're not lazy. Whether like me, you don't work a full-time job, or like so many others you wish you didn't. You're not lazy if you take naps, or if you find yourself struggling to focus, or if you come home after too long of a day and veg in front of the TV. You're not lazy if you don't turn your hobby into a side hustle. You're not lazy if you haven't managed to build the life of your dreams. You're not lazy if you sleep until noon. You are not lazy because laziness isn't a thing. Even if you aren't doing it intentionally, you are reacting to real needs and real limits by slowing down, zoning out, and resting your brain. So be kind to yourself. And be kind to other people who you find yourself thinking might be lazy too. None of us are. Until next time, I am wishing you love and joy and all of those good things, and I cannot wait to talk to you again.